Dear beloved Creator, source of all, thank you for this growing gathering of souls who are seeing through the veil of deceptions. There are layers upon layers of them, and while we do not see them all, enough seen is enough to spur us to action. We pray for our fellows who are compromised in any way, so they may heal and join the actions we are guided to address. And in acknowledging you, beloved Creator, we are reminded that the love you give is the face of what we must consciously present in all that we do here now. And so it is.
Thank you, Charlie.
My pleasure.
Hello, my name's Ron Vroman. I'm the old white man talking head for the Oregon Statewide Jural Assembly. And we'd like to bring you up to date. Maybe William will step in if he's of a mind uh, and talk about where we are, how we got here, and where we're going, and all of those that have helped, and all of those that still need to help. And we're going to need a bunch of it. Uh, Maybe even some boring talk about numbers. So, right now, we have 5 grand juries, and we have 3 petite juries that have come up with verdicts. And we're having another petite jury Sunday that we hope to have a verdict on 2 different things. The third one, it's not ready for a verdict, but it's ready for some encouragement. Uh, Everybody should know that's watching this that the Oregon Health Authority is a criminal organization that's put forth by Kate Brown and that whole group. It's all part of the doctor cult thing, and it's incredible. Hospitals require people to have a shot to be in the hospital. To work in the hospital, you have to have had the shot. That seems to be unconstitutional to me and everybody else I hang out with and everybody that watches this, I hope. But then there's people that have taken the flu shot every year, just as regular as clockwork, and they've never had the flu. And they mark it up to always getting their flu shot. Go figure. I can't. I don't have the horsepower to do that stuff. But I do know that the Oregon Health Authority and the state boards that govern MDs and chiropractors and dentists, I do know all that's unconstitutional. There's ways of doing it that are proper and right and de jure, lawful. Then there's ways of doing it that are de facto and not lawful. There ought to be some way that we, you and I, the general public, could tell if this doctor is really a doctor and knows what he's doing. And there is. And it doesn't have to be imposed by the state, which is an imposition on the doctor, and then the doctor forces an imposition onto the patient. And that's not the way it's supposed to be. And that has to be sorted out and straightened out. And the same is true for chiropractors and dentists and half a dozen other things. The state of Oregon, aka State of Oregon, the unconstitutional incorporated subdivision of the United States, Inc., that entity in color of law since November 8th, 1910, and we're turning that around this year. But we have to figure out a way to get more of you involved in what we are doing. Because we are doing this for all of us, not for me individually and not for you individually, but for every one of us individually. Now, there's some people out there, they're actually persons, that are going to be upset with what a constitutional Republican form of government actually looks like. When you cut away all of this de facto stuff, the rob from Peter to give to the BLM or Antifa, the redistribution of wealth. That's what the government likes to do. That's what 1913 was about. The redistribution of our wealth into the Federal Reserve by way of taking all the gold and taking all the silver that they could, giving us paper money that has no redeeming value. You can't go get anything specifically with it. Yeah, that's going to be hard when the crash comes. But in any case, we have to figure out how to work together. The whole thing's going to come to some kind of a crash. We have no idea what. Old people like myself, my total income comes from Social Security, and that's based on years ago information, and I'm still collecting it. And if I don't collect Social Security, then I will be on the dole. And that will be interesting. Camping out homeless in my flatbed dump truck. You have to help me get that on the road, William. All joking aside, and it's not joking, the Pareto distribution comes into effect so often. It's frequently called the 80-20. 20% of the workforce does 80% of the production. The other 80% coast and contribute 20%. We need to turn that around just a little bit. We've lost some really good people. They die and move away. But we need to have the people that we have signed up want to work. Or we have to reach people on Oregon that are not signed up that want to work, because we need your help. Some of the information that comes along is numbers you have to deal with. So we found Kate Brown, Ron Wyden, Jeff Merkley, and Suzanne Bonamici all guilty of breaking their oath, having no honor, and not in a position of holding trust. So there's 38 prosecutors. So you take 38 prosecutors and you provide all 38 prosecutors with 4 presentments of what the grand jury found. So 38 and 38 is 76. 76 and 76 is 152. That's 152 dockets, individual docket numbers that have to be filed, have to be taken care of, have to be followed up with, and that is a chore. Right now, we're working primarily on Marion County, a little bit in Lane or Lynn, a little bit in Washington, Clackamas, Multnomah, and with 11 counties in total, more than others. But that's just a little bit. Then we found 89 legislators guilty. So call that 90 times 38. Boy, that's a bunch. So 90 times, call it 40. 3,600 docket numbers that have to be followed through and worked on, because each one of those representatives and senators has a county. Some of them have more than one county. All that work has to be done, and we just don't have the bodies to do it. We get a bunch done, but then work comes along. People are getting hammered and hurt, and we have a court, so we have to do what we can do to help. And we do. And we hold another grand jury. And provide more work to be done in the de facto and in the de jure. Could use a bit of help, you guys. You can find us at orsja.org. And William always puts up plenty of information on how to get a hold of us. But we have to turn this around this year. And we have a really good handle on it. It looks like there is no rebuttal from the people that we know, people that have channels that have more information and knowledge than I do, but none of them can rebut. That's pretty close to being good. Then none of the FBI, DOJ, feds, attorneys generals, sheriffs, and DAs, none of those people have anything to say to us about any of our documents. They all acquiesce 3 times. I've come to a bit of a conclusion on why everything is abandoned, and it's not everything, but it's almost. And why do they lock the people out? And it's not clear, but it's becoming pretty obvious that there's something going on in certain areas that they're required by some kind of mechanism to close that building down to the general public. Some of them are open, most of them are closed. The courthouse stays open, but that's their cash cow. They don't want to close that. They gather in hundreds of dollars every time anybody walks through that door and gets x rayed and patted down and undressed and dressed. We really have to get this together. We have to do it really soon. Sunday's going to be a big day. I don't have any doubts that it'll go down. Here's one of the things that we're doing that is all up above the board. We picked 5 buildings. The Marco Hatfield Federal Building downtown, Oregon Archives, Oregon State Building, Oregon Health Authority, and another one it won't come right now. I think it's in Portland. Anyhow, we've decided that those buildings are not lawfully owned by who says they own it. Now, if you say you own something and you get challenged, then you have to prove your ownership. What if your ownership is bogus because you're in a bogus de facto incorporated government, which is governance, and you don't have a lawful claim to those buildings? You just don't. The paperwork doesn't match the requirements. So you can't come forward and prove your bona fides. You don't have any. So what we're thinking is, in law, you have to have a bailee. And the bailee is the person that has the keys and comes forward to exchange the building. It's not just a piece of paper at the title company, it's the transference of the real property. And that has to be done by a bailee, according to law. What if they don't have legal ownership of the building? It's an assumed ownership that they have. And nobody's ever called them on it. Therefore, they had nothing to prove. With nothing to prove, they could go on doing whatever they wanted to do and color a law. When the deception stops and we demand proof, now what are they going to do? When we demanded they show the statehood documents, they refused. They couldn't do it. Okay? If you can't prove that you own the statehood documents and you are who the statehood documents say you're supposed to be, then of course you're not going to show the statehood documents. Then if you close the building so you don't have to talk to anybody, you force the people into mass and social distancing so they can't assemble, but we still assemble. They put us into the position where we have to come forward and take the next step. So we're going to do it three ways on these buildings. I don't know. I'm not an expert. We don't have an expert in our group. So we're going to do the best we can. But it looks like, and I'm talking to title companies and stuff, but it looks like foreclosure, eviction, and quiet title. And I don't think one will work for all five properties. I think we'll have to use each one of those at least once on those five properties. For example, the Marco Hatfield building, from the information that I have, and I did some work to get it, and when you call the title company, they tell you the records have been sealed by the court. But when you do a cursory inspection of that property, you find out that there's 6 parcels of land underneath that building. And those 6 parcels of land are still owned by the owners that were evicted by, what the hell do they, eminent domain. They took their property by eminent domain from those 6 people and built a building on it. So I pulled the title and deed on that a trio years ago, and I think the title said United States of America. I'm not sure, but that is not a lawful title. There's only the United States of America and United States. Those are the only 2 lawful names. Anything else is just a name they are being called by, like US or USA or United or America. When you're writing legally to make your point properly, you use the proper name. If you don't use the proper name, you didn't make your point, you made another point. So I don't remember what the deed was. The deed could have been United States or whatever it was. But we need to pull that and look at it. And then I think we file for quiet title. And quiet title is you say, we own this building. And anybody that has a claim to that opposing us because we are Oregon lawfully and legally. We are Article 1, Section 1 of the Oregon Constitution, and all of that's legitimate. So we have a really strong case that we are the de jure Oregon. And the de facto we know is criminal and illegal. And you can look that up in Black's Law under de jure and de facto. So if we file for quiet title to take that land and that building, what are those 6 people that still own the land secretly underneath that building with some kind of a hidden deal inside the records that are sealed by the court? What are those 6 owners of those 6 parcels going to do when we file quiet title? Do you think they'll come forward with their, hey, wait a minute, I own the dirt underneath that building. We never sold it. It was never recorded. It's kind of like a mobile home parked on the lot. It's not really there. Oh yeah? Boy, that would uncover a very large fraud, don't you think? But there's a really good chance we could take the property. If not, it'll be such a big stink that somebody will have to do something to straighten it out. Then the next thing is the Oregon Archives. I pulled the records on that and started searching that, and boy, that stuff is complicated. There was a piece this big that got chopped in half, and then somebody bought another half and put those two halves together, and then their kid inherited. It just gets really messy. And then the date of November 8th, 1910 comes in there, because if it was done after November 8th, 1910, it looks to me like it was done by the state of Oregon, the subdivision of the United States, which is a constitutional impossibility because we're guaranteed a constitutional Republican form of government, not an incorporated form of government where the state is a subdivision of the feds. So that'll blow up for sure when we file for that one. But then what do you file on that one? Probably have to file foreclosure on that because property in the possession of a pirate does not change the ownership. And just because a pirate took over the state of Oregon and bought a piece of land doesn't make it the property of the pirate. That's the property of the Oregonians that lost their rights and their sovereignty legally to the color of law in 1910. But boy, once you uncover that and you do it in open court and you do it with a title company and you go down to the de facto sheriff and you require the de facto sheriff to uphold the court's order and foreclose on that property because there is no state of Oregon that is lawful, a subdivision of the United States, that's color of law. They cannot put forth a bailee. I'm almost positive of that. Then there's another one where you just have to evict. And sheriffs do evictions. There's 4 or 5 sheriffs that really know how to do evictions because they have a large enough community that that comes up. In your smaller rural counties, they might not have an eviction all year. So on some of the buildings that we're going to be looking at, taking possession of, we're going to have to figure out a way after we win the lawful contest of foreclosure, quiet title, or eviction. Where in the hell are we going to get enough money to operate that building just to keep the air conditioning going 24/7 to maintain the proper climate control within the building would probably bankrupt our assembly. Oh, yeah, that would be. But you have to bite off everything you can. And if you can't chew it, somebody else will have to. But you still have to take your bite of the apple. And that's what we're doing. We're going to push each one of the steps up to the very edge. And we have 93 guilty that need to be removed from office. And that's really interesting because a bunch of those think that they can run again, and they can't. And then we find people being treasonous. And we do a grand jury and we convict them. Somebody asked the other day, how do you enforce it? Here's the enforcement. It's really simple. To be free, to be an Oregonian, to understand the lawful de jure place we are and the criminal, illegal, illegitimate place the de facto is, when you get to that point and you demand, declare, own your freedom, nobody can do that for you. And until you comprehend that you have to do that for yourself, which people are really slow in doing, I was. God, it took me forever. But I got here eventually. You have to make that decision for yourself. Nobody can do it for you, and you can't do it alone. That's where the enforcement comes in. When you look the sheriff in the eye and you say, if you take your oath to that Constitution with those two amendments, then we know that you're criminal and you're guilty of treason, and we will try you and convict you. You have to look the sheriff right in the eye and tell him that. And then after the sheriff, you have to do all the DAs. We've already done the governor and all the legislature. Charlie's done the Supreme Court. And they're all members of Article 7 amended. And they're all with a bogus oath, the entire judiciary. Shemaiah Fagan, Secretary of State, guilty of treason. And we're dealing with her Deputy Secretary of State. We'll soon find out how Tobias Reed is doing. He's treasurer now that he didn't get to be running for governor. We have to stop all these things that are being paid out of the Treasury in Federal Reserve notes that are going to be pretty worthless soon. Be prepared to trade and barter.
They do not want to let go of this. They do not intend on losing here. And we do not intend giving it back to them.
And then the bullets started flying, and then he jumps out of the car, and he's got both his hands up.
And he got out of the car, and he had his hands in the air. He's like, just shoot me then. This is what you want, just shoot me. And they did. They shot him dead. with his hands in the air, and I saw it. I swear to God, he was just walking with his hands in the air, and they shot him. And they shot him dead, and then after he was down on the ground, shot him 3 more times.